everyone. Sam Shaw here, founder of Wall Street Mastermind. Excited to be back today with another client interview for you guys. Today, we're actually speaking to one of our Canadian students, Aayush, and I'm really excited to have him on here just to talk to you guys about kind of how his recruiting process went, especially being from Canada. What are some of the similarities or differences with the Canadian process, and how were we able to prepare him for that? And hopefully you guys take away a lot of useful insights from this interview. And Aayush, I just want to thank you again for taking the time to talk to us today.
Hey, thanks, man. Good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So to start off, if you can kind of just give people a quick introduction of who you are or what type of candidate you are, so they can kind of get a sense for how similar you are to them.
Sure. To start with, I was an international student here in Canada. Came here in 2017 to UBC. It's located in Vancouver, and initially I came here as a computer science and economics student. But over time, I realized, and I was also an athlete, a varsity athlete over here at UBC. So over time, I realized that computer science was not for me, and I found my niche in philosophy and economics. But also I joined a trading group on campus where I got some initial exposure to finance and equities. But at that point, I was still not sure about like how the whole recruiting process works or anything related to and what a career in finance looks like. But through some of my athletic contacts, I was able to land in an internship at a big four, like an advisory internship, where still not really knowing a lot about finance, I was still able to get to see a broad view of the industry. It was a very macro internship in terms of going into debt and stuff. And then I realized that, hey, I've seen how the corporate finance division works, how the transaction service division works. And this is something I could relate to. And the team I was working with, they were advising a lot of private equities at that time. And the concept of private equity was introduced to me. But I was still, how in Canada, the industry is very dominated and by, I would say, what major you're doing. So mostly people who go into finance, like investment banking or anything, are finance majors. Like 97, 98% are finance majors. So not being from a finance background, it was almost like I did not know how to really navigate these things. And the focus is also very, like they only recruit 2 or 3 schools, and your school is usually a regional target but not a national target or anything, like all over the country. So first, being from a non-target and also not being a finance major, I was like a little confused in how to really approach the networking thing, and also being not surrounded by finance students who were recruiting, or maybe because I was mostly with my athletic friends or my economics friends whose interests were not really finance. So that prompted me to like really join Wall Street Mastermind. And so, yeah, that's my background before joining here. So, yeah.
Got it. Okay, cool. So a lot of really good context. So UBC, you're saying, is not a target school in Canada then?
Here's the thing. So UBC is a target school for the Western region, for Vancouver, but the industry in Vancouver is very small. Like there would be 6 or 7 summer analyst position in the whole city.
Whole city, not at a bank. Okay.
No, at the whole city, 6 or 7. You would still get look-ins into Calgary, which is like an energy hub. But again, they would prefer the students who are studying in the Calgary area, like the Alberta area, as well as like you would get a look, but yeah, you still need to network really hard. And then in Toronto, they prefer the local schools like Ivy and Queens, which two are like the major recruiting schools. They do respect UBC. If you come forward and tell them that you're from UBC, they will appreciate it, but it doesn't cross their mind like at an initial instant. So you really need to go forward and say that, hey, I'm from UBC and I'm interested, or hey, I'm from this school and I'm interested, and then you will get a look in. But if you just put your application in being from UBC, probably will not get a look in, even though in an international context, just like if you want to apply outside Canada, the likelihood of them recognizing UBC would be way more than another school. So at that sense, you're in an advantage, but within the bread and butter recruiting, you are at a disadvantage.
Because essentially Toronto is like the New York equivalent for Canada, and that's where the vast majority of these offers are. And so, and do you know, like you said, 6 or 7 in Vancouver, do you know, relatively speaking, how many positions there are usually in a city like Toronto?
So yeah, so just a broad view, like I think so the Canadian industry, investment banking industry specifically, is organized in this way. So you have the big five Canadian banks, which are like which basically are the top of the pile banks over here, like, but also by nature they are middle market. Like the deal sizes they are working on is something what you would call middle market in the US.
Yeah.
There is bulge brackets, but bulge brackets are more in boutique form in the sense that they are more mainly coverage groups, which are basically divided into financial sponsors and corporates. There is no, or like which you could call diversified basically.
Mhm.
And the financial sponsor groups mainly work with the pension funds in Canada, and the corporate funds mainly work with mining and energy companies which do cross-border deals. And or the bankers over there are only there to get the deal in, and the deal is rigged from New York or from San Francisco or from Houston or anything like that. So in those bulge brackets and the international banks, which you could say like Society General and others like that, they have a team of maybe like 10, 12 bankers. So they hire one intern every year. And then you have your elite boutiques, which solely focus on restructuring. So I think there is 3 or 4 of their elite boutiques, along with your like those big restructuring consultants like Alvarez and Marsal and FTI. Again, they hire one intern. So overall, like 15 in this case. And then the Canadian banks, I think they have a class of 10 to 15, like analysts, investment banking analysts in Toronto. And from those 15, I would say 6 or 7 or even 8 are from IB, 2 or 3 are from Queens, and then you're left with 3, UBC, UFC, McGill, or like whatever, like you put your schools over there, like you have the chance on those 3 seats. So yeah.
That's for the big five Canadian banks, basically.
Yeah, so overall, you would say there are 50 investment banking analyst positions, summer analyst positions
Yeah.
in the whole of Toronto, which is actually very less compared to what it is in New York. So, yeah.
Yeah. 50 positions at the big five, and then all those other firms, bulge bracket, elite boutique, so on and so forth, hire maybe one each. So either way, you're talking about 60,
50,
70.
70, overall in the whole country, 80, like that's it.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a much, much, much smaller market. I mean, because here in the States, like even a bank could have more interns than that, right? Like I know Goldman Sachs, I think hired like less than 500 interns in 2019, but I'm sure a huge chunk of that was in the States. So that's not a lot of people, basically. So extremely difficult to break in. When did you start thinking about like we're seriously recruiting? Was it junior year? Or was it senior year? Or like how late were you to the game?
So like starting with like because I was not surrounded by the fans, but I remember I was in first year, I was applying to IB positions just for the sake of like I kind of had the idea of what I want to do after my like a Big Four internship.
No.
So but I really did not know like how the whole process is, what you really need to do like to get your name in, worry about the interview later or like anything.
Right.
So like I think I was when I first joined Wall Street Mastermind, it was, I think, my third year, second term, like first month of my second term. I think that was the first call I had with one of your representatives, where I really realized that, oh no, like this is what the process is. Like, because I remember in my first year of third year, like I was thinking very similar to like how other internships that yeah the batches close in September, October, but then they reopen in January, February, like your tech and your Big Four internship. So you might have a second chance to apply, and that's what I was going with. But I had like the tech that oh no. So but it was a very unique case in the sense that I was not surrounded by any kind of finance knowledge or background around myself. So
Yeah.
yeah. So
So I just checked since you mentioned it, but it looks like you joined at the end of May of 2020, which is it was just like last year, right?
yeah,
You graduated 2021, right?
yeah,
May of
like
2021.
yeah.
So you graduated a few months ago. So you probably joined at the very end of your third year then, right? Going
Yeah,
into your
our last month of when we started talking was like the last 2 months of third year, like
yeah,
everything. Yeah.
got it. Okay. And prior to that, you like what were you doing on your own already? Because you didn't like coming to Wall Street Mastermind wasn't like the very first thing you did, right?
Yeah.
I assume you had tried a bunch of stuff on your own. Like, it sounded like you already applied to some stuff. Um, what kind of traction were you getting? Like, were you getting selected for interviews, or maybe you made it to a certain round? Or can you kind of walk us through that a little bit?
Sure. So I think like my overall background was, uh, I think, good in the sense that I was getting with my athletic like background, with my grades and everything, I was like kind of fine in that sense. But like learn how to learn finance, like basically that was the question. I was not a finance major. I've never learned taken a formal finance training before that. So even if I pick up like a 400 question guide, I think that's the book, or any other forum or something, and I start reading the first question, I just don't get the gist of like what's happening over here. Like I do enjoy reading the financial science. I do enjoy reading about the industry, but to know the A to B to C of the industry. So how to go about it. Some case study competitions were helping, but it was not really, knowledge. It was like scattered knowledge. You know one thing, but you don't know how this thing happens or anything like that.
Right.
So overall, even if I used to get the interviews, like that was the biggest disconnect I was having, in the sense that I really did not know how to prepare for an interview, but also on the same hand, formulate my story to integrate everything, like to ace that interview. So yeah, so that was the approach. I thought like it's not working at this point. Do have the content. I do believe in myself that I can do it, but there is a big bridge of gap or formal training I would need for someone. So that's how I joined Wall Street Mastermind. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, by formulating your story, you're talking about things like, hey, I see you don't have any finance background, or I see you're a computer science major. Why do you want to do investment banking? And having like a logical and coherent story to that question, basically.
Yeah, or even like how my background here goes into investment bank. Like as I said, 98% of the finance majors. I tell them that I'm a philosophy student, and they're like, "What are you doing here?" And I really do not have an answer of what I'm doing here, other than I'm interested. But not like I wasn't preparing answers for that, but also like how to really nail that answer and to come up as convincing that I'm not here to waste your time. Like I'm here to, yeah.
Right. That's a good point. So then, given when you started, then because most people they try to do like a summer internship between their third year and their fourth year, right? And then if you do a good job, you get a return offer. Um, you weren't able to do that in banking then, given when you started. Is that right?
So yes, but also no, in the sense that I joined, I think again, like as we said in May, like Wall Street Mastermind, and I was in between an interview process at that time. It was due to a case study. It was at a like top three restructuring firms globally, and I did get an interview at that point, and I recently joined Wall Street Mastermind at that point. And one of the main reasons was to like nail the technical part, because I knew I cleared the case study, the group is getting an interview, now you have to do something. Due to COVID, I think they decided to hire an extra intern, and I was very lucky in that scenario that they were hiring in May. Usually their recruiting used to finish 8 months before, so maybe there was some kind of consequence happening. So I joined the program. I think it's just 13 hours it takes to finish the technical module, and I just sit down. It takes me 2 days to read A to Z of all those 13 hours, and then I'm like, wow, like if I had done this like 4 or 5 months ago, who knows, or even like 8 months ago, who knows what would have happened. So
Right.
I'm not saying that it only takes you 13 hours to do the technical, but those 13 hours were so productive that any add-on knowledges that I gained was very easy to learn after that. And I think my interview was like 7 or 8 days after I joined. And in those 8 days, the grind I went through, like I was able to nail that interview, and was fortunately able to get an internship in that summer. So yeah.
That's that's an amazing story. So yeah, I mean, we tell people if you learn the technicals the right way, it shouldn't take, I don't know, like people usually spend hundreds of hours sometimes, like literally memorizing the 400 questions guide or whatever, right? Like if you do it the right way, I think our content on the technical piece from A to Z, like you said, is really just around 20 hours. Like that's all there is to it. There's not that much more that you need to know than that. And then beyond that, obviously, sure, you're gonna maybe watch certain parts more than once. You're maybe gonna, do some practice and make sure you really understand the information. But 20, 30 hours, like you said, kind of if you're approaching it the right way, that's all you need. Right. And in your case, because it was so last minute and you had this interview coming up, that's obviously super crucial. But I would say even for students who maybe aren't in as much of a rush, you still gotta understand like there's a lot of benefit to being so efficient with learning your technicals because that's the one thing that most students spend all of their time stressing out about.
Yeah.
And if you don't have to stress out about that because you just learned it just like that, now you can reallocate all of the time you would have spent doing that to other also equally, if not more important things that are going to move the needle for you. Like, for example, networking with these bankers because you come from a non-target school, you're not a finance major, don't have a traditional background. Networking became super important, and now you have more time for that, right? Or you have more time to go out and pick up a part-time internship maybe during the school year and build up your resume even more and make yourself more qualified. It's just like we only have so much time in a day. Everybody, you and your competition, everybody has 24 hours in a day. Who can utilize that time better? That's that's
I
usually
also
that's
add
the
one
goal.
more thing that say like I was at zero before picking up those modules, like 8 days before interview. Like it's a hard interview. It's a restructuring interview, and I have 8 days to nail it, and I have zero knowledge of how a financial statement looks like or what the three statements are. Like I know what they are. Like I did the case studies and everything, but like the technicalities of how they're connected and everything. But also on the same hand, I need to learn more about the debt. I need to learn the LBO. I need to do that, and I have 7 or 8 days. So once I picked it up, it felt like the way the content was explained, it felt really like a very smooth movie. Like you don't need to know the backstory, but if I could explain something to my little sister, it means that I know that thing as well as like she should understand that thing.
Yeah,
And if I could connect what I'm learning in my everyday life and observe it, it makes it even easier for me to learn.
yeah,
So I think most of the time, if you pick your technicals as something very stressful and something that, oh no, this is only for investment banking or this, I think that's when you are taking it way too seriously and it doesn't need to be taken that seriously.
right.
Rather, if you could just think of those statements about how you operate daily financially, looking at like the examples around you of what's happening and just thinking about them, like it makes it even easier. So in that sense, after those like 13, 15 hours of technical training, I was literally able to imagine like what's happening, what's really happening, even though I have not done that work. So it was very well laid out. And after that, if I pick up any other, like I did pick up other books just because I now have a base to read those books or anything. It was so much more easier for me to understand that and develop the higher level of knowledge of whatever I need to do.
Yeah,
So yeah, so that way I think it was really beneficial for me and it ended up working out. So I'm
yeah.
not really complaining. So
What about on the, so we talked about the technical side. Basically, if I were to summarize that part, it's like even if you come in with zero knowledge, you're starting completely from scratch, you're not a finance major, it doesn't matter. You can learn that stuff in a very short amount of time because of the way that we explain this stuff to you, right? It makes it really digestible and easy to consume, and really easy to understand. Now, that's just one part of the interview, though, right? Going back to your point earlier, the other part, which is arguably just as important, if not more, is telling your story and answering certain questions that you know they're going to ask, where maybe you have not the most traditional background and trying to match up your past experiences to what it is that they're looking for and making sure that there's that alignment. So what do we do on the behavioral side, or like what did you find to be most helpful there, or what was different from maybe what you did inside of Wall Street Mastermind with the behavioral side of the preparation that maybe you weren't doing before on your own?
Yeah, like just one thing to add before I answer that question is like, from my experience of after interviewing so much, I feel like technical is probably the easiest part you will get on the interview because it's predictable. Like,
Yeah,
you know what's going to happen. It's yes or no. Like, there's no ambiguity.
yeah,
But you are talking more in the subjective world of behaviorals. It's like writing an essay, but you're reciting an essay. Who can be a better storyteller? Who can be more engaging in telling your own story?
yeah,
And I think a lot of students, like I've seen after I did this program and have been talking to others, I feel like the biggest thing is like they don't realize like what the real story they're coming from and are not able to really portray it in the right direction or something. Like they have the story and I had the story and everything, but I was not able to join the dots of how this works over here, this works over here. So after I think we had our behavioral questionnaire, like I filled it and we had our 2, 3 calls over it, discussions over it. It was not only till that point which like helped me formulate my story. After that, like I felt like I had a guidance of how to think about other things. So naturally, like you would not be spoon feeding me for a year. So I basically grasped that way of thinking. So even though a new event happened in my life, I need to update my story. It just started coming automatically. Like you started to think of more skills. Could you add it over here or no? I don't need to like go back and ask you about that every time. But that's the thing. Like the major thing is like lighting up the fire. So that questionnaire lighted up the fire of me thinking in that sense that, hey, this is how I need to answer the question. This is now what I need. I have the structure. I know what is expected,
yeah,
and the goal. This event related to like this, and you over time become a better storyteller.
yeah.
And I think that,
I think that's a great point, which is, look, the tough part with the behaviorals is 99% of the time when students try to come up with their own behavioral answers, they're thinking about it from their own point of view, as they should be, right? And the way that you would think about your personal stories as a student, I don't want to say never, but it may or may not be how the bankers are thinking about it, or how the bankers want to think about it, or how they want to see your story, right? And so, to your point, like what we're teaching you is not exactly what to say, or we don't give you a script and say, hey, this is what your story should be, because everybody has a different story, right? But we're more teaching you how to think like a banker would, so that you can kind of put yourself in their shoes. And once, like, the frameworks that we give you guys is just like, hey, these are the things that bankers care about, or these are the things that they want to hear, and we would probably lay them out in this order, right, in terms of how we structure the answers. And then you guys can take whatever background or experiences or stories that you have and kind of plug them into that, right? It's almost like just filling in the blanks now that you have the structure. And that, I think, is very eye-opening for a lot of people, because it's hard to it's hard to like look at your own stories from a different point of view when you're the only one that's looking at it, right? Like if you write out your story and you're looking at it trying to like think about how can I make this better, it's really hard to come up with the improvements because you've already put your best foot forward, right? But usually what people experience is like when they get a separate set of eyes on it from someone who's more experienced and has actually done the job and has been an interviewer and has seen, also not just that, but seen hundreds of other people's answers, and they have that wealth of knowledge, or that it's almost like this database of what works and what doesn't work, and then they give you a different point of view, or they point out like, hey, this part could be slightly different, where maybe this part's not necessary and maybe we add in this other part, like whatever it may be. The reaction we always get is like, oh yeah, that makes sense, but why didn't I think of that on my own? Right? But that's like almost always how it works out. And so I think the tricky thing is like you have to have that self-awareness, because a lot of people, they look at their own behavioral answers, they're like, yeah, I think it's good. I think my stories are good. Like I don't really see how this could be any better. So I don't really need help. But that's the problem, right? Is that you actually might need help, you just don't know it yet.
Yeah, another thing I would say is like as you said, they have the database and they have like basically a to-do list in their mind. Like, oh, does a story check mark this? Okay, boom, technicals, boom. Now it sounds better, they will do it. But when they get your resume, everyone like I read a resume, you read a resume, you would try to formulate a story behind it, or like just try to judge it, or like human reaction normally. But once they in the interview they have your resume and you are reciting your resume, you with your words have the ability to direct them to read how they should be reading your resume.
Yeah.
And like the I think where the persuasiveness power comes to play in, like make sure they read the resume how you want them to read
Yeah.
and those boxes. And I think over time, with how we formulated our behaviorals, I felt that once they get that into the trap, they will ask you questions more which they want to know more about you rather than the tell me about your three biggest strengths or something. Like you want it to be a conversation to continue. I tell my story, they're like, oh, that's super interesting, tell me what's that something.
Yeah.
So to put in the engaging questions,
Yeah.
like how that conversation, that's very important with behaviorals. It should
Right.
not be a full stop, rather it should be a dot and they ask you about the dot. So
Right. Absolutely. Um, I guess the other question that I'm sure a lot of people are wondering is like, hey, so most of Wall Street Masterminds students are here in the U.S. and they're applying for roles in the U.S. And so, if I'm a Canadian student or I want to work in Canada, like, does this program still work for me, or am I still going to get everything I need from the program, or is it kind of different, or was there anything that was missing that um, maybe would have helped, but I had to get from elsewhere? Like, what was your experience with that?
sure. So before I answer that question, like after being in this program, I was successfully able to recruit in two countries like Canada as well as the UK. So obviously there is a lot of overlap in the sense that how the investment banking industry works, because the work is basically the same, but also the interviews, irrespective of the geography, are same. Like they have the same questions, they have the same behaviors to ask. You are expected to live the same kind of rigorous lifestyle, work the same hours or something. It's not like, oh, you're in Canada, so maybe 10 hours less or 10 over like this. So the thing is like, uh, in that sense, like if you really think about it, is like you nail your behaviors, you nail your technicals. The networking module is like how to talk to people. Like it's basically how to talk to people. If you have lived in that country for certain amount of time, you should have a sense of how do I talk to people from this culture or something. And right now, like both Canada, US, UK for that matter are very diverse countries, and like how to like really approach, and there is a standard way of professional speaking or a professional way of talking or writing an email. All English speaking countries will have like the similar way of writing. So I
Yeah.
don't think really a big deal of whether this program is from a US or from Canada. Like you can be from anywhere. Rather, like I would say it's like I couldn't recruit for US mainly because I needed an H-1B sponsorship, which is really difficult for an analyst roles.
Yeah.
But can don't need an H-1B, they need a T1 sponsorship, and that sponsorship is way easier to get. And banks do sponsor most of the boutiques do. Four or five of the bulge brackets do. I think the big I think HSBC does like a couple of more. I think Jeffries does, like the other big middle markets, they also do. So
Right.
um, being part of the whole group at Wall Street Mastermind, you have the American students, you have a better understanding of the timeline, what's going on over there or something. So if you want to also recruit for the US, it gives you a real advantage of knowing that, hey, there are people from target schools from US in this group, and this is what they are doing. Going
Yeah.
to the office hours, you're knowing where they are standing. And that's how I could get my lift up in recruiting for US as well as in Canada. And also the Canadian recruiting is like a couple of a month to 1.5 months later than the US recruiting.
Yeah.
So, so if you are on top of if you are ready according to the US recruiting cycle, by the time the Canadian one comes, you're ready to knock it off the park. So,
Right.
so I think I see it more as an advantage than a real disadvantage, like in that
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. And did you say like 5 minutes ago you also recruited for the UK?
Yeah, I also recruited for the UK.
And how was that?
It was good. I was able to land two positions in the UK, but and I was pretty fixed on going to one. We started with the whole visa process, but after Brexit, it was like process couldn't continue. Like the rules changed a bit for new grad rules from here. So the main problem was like pre-Brexit. If you do not work there as an intern, if you're going there as on a full-time basis, you need the definition of experienced worker was graduating, doing your undergrad degree. But now your definition has changed to doing your undergrad degree plus 1 year of work experience. I did not have that 1 year full-time work experience, so my immigration couldn't fall through. So that was the biggest problem in that case. So yeah, so but it did work over there. Like people like to talk, so if you are able to network over there, and you would be surprised, like if they get a random email from a kid in North America or something, like it's not like they would ignore or something. Like if they are curious enough, like why is he reaching out, there is something mutual, they would talk to you. Like it's not a big deal, you know. So
So you took the kind of what we taught in the networking modules, and then you leveraged that to network your way into interviews across the Atlantic Ocean in a different country, basically. And then you eventually actually got the offers too, even though you're not going there.
yeah. So, and also another thing was like after you initially start spamming the emails, you schedule your calls and something. After 10 or 15, 20 calls, you get a feeling of what kind of people you connect more with. What For me, suppose I was really connecting well with people in financial sponsors and people in power and utilities. And then I realized that when I'm talking to these bankers, it's a better use of my time and their time too, because I'm asking more intuitive questions. The conversation is very flowing or something. And therefore, I start targeting groups which might not be a wise for an internship, because in internship you want to get in, but I was doing more a full-time recruit. So I just wanted to get there, and these groups are something what I like and I would target and have a better chance, because the positions are very less in their full time. So you really need to stand out in that sense. So after I realized that, even across the pond, I started like emailing them, people working specifically in these two groups, and just tweaking your interest in the email, that how we are connected. It got me decent friction. So yeah, it works. So
Got it. And so ultimately, I mean, you've been working with us for a little over a year, right? And so, like, how many offers did you secure throughout this entire process in total? Like,
um, the first internship, like within the first week, two in the UK, one with the Canadian Pension Fund, and this current internship and the full-time offer, six.
okay, got,
But yeah, various reasons of choosing whichever I chose, that's different story. But yeah, overall 5 to 6.
got it. Okay. And ultimately, like, what did you go with? Like, what are you going to be doing? Where are you going to be joining or taking your talents to?
So I would keep it a little light. I'm going to a British multinational bank, like easy to guess from there, but yeah, like
Yeah,
somebody can take a shot. There are not many.
yeah.
And I will be going within their financial sponsors, leverage finance group.
Okay,
So
got it.
yeah.
That's awesome, man. Well, it sounds like that was the group that you wanted to be in from the get go, and so that's really really exciting. Um, so, guys, just because we're running up against the clock here, but if you're listening to this and maybe you're a student in Canada trying to recruit, it's a small market. Banking is already really competitive no matter where you are, but when there are so few jobs in the market, it's even more imperative that you really, really make sure you're as competitive as possible, right? And it doesn't matter if you don't necessarily go to a target school or you're not a finance major or whatever other stories or limiting beliefs you're telling yourself right now about why you may or may not be able to get this job. Like, the fact of the matter is you don't know until you try, right? And even for Ayush, like, it wasn't like easy. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. Like, he had to grind it out for a really long time to get to where he is today, but every step that he took, like he got, like he said, 6 offers along the way. Every step, every offer, he was getting a little bit closer to the ultimate goal that he wanted to accomplish, right? But like if you're in Canada, you're trying to recruit for banking, we can absolutely help you. We would love to help you. Um, all you have to do is first reach out and schedule a free strategy session with our team. Completely free call just for our team to hop on and have a quick chat with you for 30, 45 minutes, learn more about your situation. What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? How much time do you have? And what are some of the challenges that you're currently experiencing? Like, why do you feel like you need help in figuring out, can we actually help you with those things? Because sometimes we can and sometimes we can't, right? More often than not, we can. But again, we want to be sure before we actually do anything together. So based on that, based on what you tell us, if we can help you, then we'll walk you through what we think that might look like and how it will work. But if we don't think we're the best people to help you, then we'll just give you some advice at a minimum on what we think you should do. And then you can take that and go out and implement it on your own. And either way, our goal is for you to walk away from this call better off than coming into the call, right? So if you're interested in doing that, feel free to book a free strategy session with us by going to our website. It's www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street's abbreviated to ST, so it's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And we look forward to speaking with you. All right. So with that said, Aayush, I want to thank you for taking so much time to talk to us about your recruiting journey. And it's really exciting to see the phenomenal outcome you were able to get in the end. And I know that you worked super hard for this. We obviously we interact all the time and saw the questions you were asking, and we could tell you were working hard at it. So it's really good to see it pay off in the end, and can't wait to see all the success that you have going forward, and excited for you to just embark on this journey, this long career that you have ahead of you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, and thanks for the support.
Yeah, absolutely. So, guys, that'll be it for today's episode. I want to thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll be back with more of these for you guys in the near future. All right, talk soon.